Ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Maggie Atkinson. I'm Children's Commissioner for England. You might have seen me on the 10 o'clock news last night talking about the horrors of the case in Windsor and Maidenhead. I have to tell you that I did 20 minutes on that group and they used about 7.5 seconds of it. Never mind. Happens all the time. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted that you're here as a region, not just as a city, because the stronger your voice, not only with each other and your individual local authorities, but also with your MPs. And if you know any members of the House of Lords to whom you owe a great deal as a result of what they did with this bill, I adore the Lords. They don't half get in the way. I love it. They delayed the royal assent to this piece of legislation. It should have been through by the end of January or very early February. They had to lay special clauses to let it go further than that. And the reason it was as late as it was getting royal assent was because the Lords picked over every word and every sentence and every full stop, very particularly about the bits that are in it about children with special educational needs and disabilities. Never underestimate the power of the second chamber in our parliament. It has the best representation of people with a range of special educational needs and other disabilities and additional needs of any democratic body I've ever come across. It is one of those organisations where, particularly when they appoint crossbench peers, not party peers, but crossbench peers, they go very deliberately down a track of representativeness of the population wherever they can find it. There are very few hereditary peers left in the Lords. They're almost all either party or crossbench. The other group of Lords that I very, very strongly rate are the bishops, who are a force for social good. They won't have any of the nonsense that is about social injustice, the bishops. So, if you can get onto the Lords and Commons website, find out who your MP is and talk to them, but also find out who the Lords are, who represent or who are part of this part of the fabric of England. There are Lords who come from East Midlands backgrounds. There will be Lords who have got names like, Lord or Lady, whatever it is, of Putnell, or Lord or Lady, whatever it is, of Leicester. Or find them and talk to them. They are extremely amenable to being spoken to. You meet me on the day that my part of the Children and Families Act went live. I am now here, not only, this is my old strapline, it says championing children and young people in England. My new strapline is promoting and protecting the rights of children in England. Don't underestimate how important that is, because we are now a rights-based organisation. And I have now, finally, got a casework function, a helpline function, particularly for people who are in or have left care, who are educated and or living away from home, and I have no doubt at all that with the parents in this room who've been offered placements in really quite far distant educational provision, particularly in residential provision. And we're really excited about taking on that bit of the remit. If you've heard of the Children's Rights Director based at Ofsted, Dr. Roger Morgan, his office closed yesterday and his function passed to me at midnight. So this is new remit day for me. My office is tweeting like crazy, and they're tweeting about your event as well. So if you're on Twitter, do get onto my Twitter feed and you can retweet and follow. I'm really grateful that you took us through the bits of the Act that are still to come in September. It's a really, really important piece of legislation, I think, but it's a bit of a Christmas tree act. Somebody went round the departments and said, have you got anything you want legislating on? So what we've got in the Children and Families Act is a huge aggregation of all sorts of bits and pieces, and you will need to keep your eye on all those balls, otherwise you'll lose something, because it goes. Fostering, adoption, shared parenting, parental leave, special educational needs and disabilities, and the Office of the Children's Commissioner. And the Office of the Children's Commissioner bit, we fought like crazy to get changed and strengthened even more, and lost, but the Lords really concentrated on the other bits of the bill, as it was. We wrote what's called a Child Rights Impact Assessment on this piece of legislation when it was very new. And one of the areas that we concentrated on very hard was the issues to do with children with additional special educational needs and disabilities. And like Contact a Family and like the Council for Disabled Children, we fought hard on making sure that all of those children were in scope and none of them were out of it. But we also fought hard for things like Young people who have an education, health and care plan, if they get themselves in trouble with the law, and I have to tell you that 60% of young prisoners have got a learning disability of some sort or another, and many of them have either an un or ill-identified brain injury, brain syndrome, acquired brain injury, traumatic brain injury, and they are ill or undiagnosed, and they are ill or untreated. The notion was that if you got yourself in trouble with the law and ended up locked up, you would lose your education, health and care plan, because apparently you stop being needy when you become a prisoner. We fought a doughty battle with the Council for Disabled Children in Contact of Family and Lord Ramsbottom, who led the charge in the Lords and laid the amendment, and they will not now lose their entitlement to an education, health and care plan when they end up in prison. If you think about some of the things that happen to our young prisoners, the punishment for committing a crime is that you lose your liberty. And that's the only punishment, actually, in law. To further punish you by giving you ill access to education or ill access to support or ill access to cultural activities or time with your fellow inmates is an additional punishment. And that's not what you were put down for. So it's really, really important that we won that. We won another one. We were part of the group that pushed with the Medical Charities Alliance for a really strong amendment that is about the recognition that if you have a child with a lifelong or chronic and lifelong or just chronic medical condition in your school, you can't say, oh, we don't do tubes, or we don't do needles, or we don't do nappies, or we don't do... And the amendment that changed that was actually made by the government. Because of Edward Simpson, because of Lord Nash listening, Lord Nash is the Lord's Minister who took this through, and he's very interested as well. Schools will now be under a statutory duty to ensure the dispensation of medication, the assistance of children with a lifelong condition or a medical condition that requires intervention, and they will no longer be allowed to risk assess, I've met children like this, type 1 diabetes children whose sugars can't be balanced, out of things like abseiling or canoeing or going to the seaside or running around London Zoo. And some schools will risk assess those children out of that and send for their mum or their dad to fetch them home when those activities are underway. They've closed that door on those schools. How it's done is going to be one of the things that's about planning the local offer and making sure that if it does need a nurse's intervention, if you are clearing a vent tube or you are sorting out a nasal feeding tube or a stomach tube or whatever, and there is nobody in the school who is a teacher or classroom support assistant with the relevant qualifications to do it, you wouldn't want them messing, would you? No. You want the presence of a healthcare assistant or somebody to help, and the local offer will have to take that into account. Because there is a percentage of children with those needs in every local authority in the land. Most of them tell me, I'm going to be a bit controversial here, most of those children tell me that what they want to do is go to school with their mates. And most of their mates don't go to a special school. Sorry. Most of them tell me, most 16 and 17-year-olds tell me as they face the cliff edge of falling into adult services and disappearing forever. And there is issues about transitions, and they'll have to be part of the local offer as well. This Act is a powerful, powerful piece of legislation, issues well. Most 16 and 17-year-olds tell me, those who are capable of speaking and all those who've got an advocate who speaks with and for them and all those who use symbols and signs, that what they actually want is you to stop taking them to school in the people carrier and teach them how to use the bus. And use what you'd be spending on the people carrier on an assistant. Because they want to be a teenager. But I am one of the local authority directors of children's services who was ombuds judged for daring to say that and for changing my local authority's transport policy. So, what children and young people with disabilities tell me as Children's Commissioner, and it's my job to bring their voices and views into the heart of policy making and into the heart of decision making. And there are several of them on my board. I have a young people's board called Amplify. They chose that name because they said it makes them louder, which is funny. I have a number of youngsters with disabilities, and I want to talk about a report that we've written where they were co-researchers. And what they tell me is, I want to be a peer with my peer group. That's what I'm asking society to step up to the plate and offer. And that's where I think society has the struggle on its hands, because there are schools who don't see that, there are health workers who don't see that, there are certainly social workers who don't see that. Why do I talk about this as if I know what I'm talking about? I don't have direct personal, as in direct line, experience of living in the household of a child with disabilities. My mum's dearly departed sister had Down syndrome, and I spent most of my growing up with her. I worked at FAB. I was the table tennis guru at FAB. And for a large part of my middle adult years, I was very closely connected to the Campbell Village Trust, very particularly at Bottom Village, where I was one of the people who sorted out their forestry, because I've done a variety of things in my time. My understanding of those issues that families with youngsters with the difficulties that I've just described, in my family experience, were about my equally dearly departed and much beloved grandparents continuing to infantilise my auntie until the day they died. She was not allowed, while she was under their roof, not really, to become an adult. And that's a really serious challenge for everybody concerned, because their wish not to allow that was about their wish to keep her safe, to make sure that she was beloved, as she was. But when she moved into a very small group home on the edge of the nearest city, she blossomed. She got a job. She rode the bus. She couldn't read still, and she couldn't count, but the bus drivers got to know her. She worked for the ambulance service as part of the group of people who cleaned and made sure that the ambulances were stocked and provided. She was taken into the heart of the ambulance service. They considered her a really important member of their team because they'd carved out the job for the elements that she could do. And she did 4 mornings a week, and that's all she did, but she earned a salary, and it made all the difference in the world. But it came very late for Anne. And what we need to do as a society is to make sure it comes early for our children, that they grow and they develop. It's really important for me that my office takes very seriously the needs and aspirations and ambitions of children and young people with any range of disabilities or special educational needs. We do a great deal of work with youngsters in all sorts of parts of the system. But if I tell you that part of my new remit is very particular for children in care, and you will not be surprised to hear that a larger percentage than there is in the general population of children who end up in care have some sort of additional need or disability. And I'm not sure how well prepared our workforce in those settings is to deal with those children's needs. Whether they're in care for a short period and then reintegrate into their family, or whether care is their journey. One of the youngsters who helped us write our report, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, is really quite severely autistic. His thing is Godzilla, which is really interesting when you're in the middle of a conversation with the whole team about something to do with, the world of employment for 16 to 24-year-olds, and he puts his hand up and wants to talk about Godzilla. But watching the way that his compatriots, most of whom are not learning disabled in any way at all, manipulate their conversation to accommodate him, and then are capable of moving him off Godzilla and back into the subject without an adult intervening at all, is astonishing. They are amazing children and young people, amazing. And the greater the head we give them to be amazing, the better it seems to me. But then I'm children's commissioner, so I would say that.